Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon. I'm Toya Porter, Education Program Consultant with the Louisiana Department of Education Nutrition Support Division. And today we will be reviewing the SFSP Meal Pattern and Food Buying Guide. The first topic we will be discussing will be the 2023 SFSP Meal Pattern Requirements. All SFSP sponsors must meet the minimum meal pattern requirements as set forth by the USDA at all participating SFSP sites. School food authorities, those school systems that participate in the National School Lunch and Breakfast programs during the school year, may meet these minimum meal pattern requirements through offering the SFSP meal pattern or by offering the more detailed NSLP or SBP meal pattern in their summer feeding programs. All other types of SFSP sponsors, which are governmental, private nonprofit, universities, and colleges, will do so by meeting the SFSP meal pattern. These sponsors do not have the option of offering the NSLP SBP meal pattern as the SFAs do. Since the SFAs are in the business of offering the NSLP SBP meal pattern all throughout the academic school year, the next slides will focus on the Summer Feeding Service Program meal pattern and what it entails. This year, only school food authorities, which again are schools that participate in the NSLP SBP, will be allowed to utilize the offer versus serve option. For all other SFSP sponsors, all children must take all components of the meal being served, including milk. They may not decline any of the items. On this slide, we show the minimum daily component requirements for the breakfast and lunch or supper summer meal patterns. Please note that supper requirements are identical to lunch meal pattern requirements. It is important to stress that this slide shows the base minimum requirements needed to meet the daily summer feeding service program meal pattern. For school food authorities choosing to allow children the option to use offer versus serve, further steps will need to be taken to meet compliance. This will be addressed in more detail later. To meet minimum breakfast meal pattern requirements, sites must offer a serving of milk, which is 8 ounces, a serving of fruit or vegetable, half of cup, and a bread grain serving to all children who participate in the meal. With breakfast, 3 components are offered: milk, vegetable or fruit, and bread grain, with at least one item present on the menu from each component group. To meet the minimum lunch or supper meal pattern requirements, sites must offer a serving of milk, a serving of bread grain, 2 servings or ounces of meat, or an approved meat alternative, and 2 different items to total at least a 3/4 cup serving from the vegetable and fruit component. For this meal service, the meal planner is ensuring that 4 components are present each day, with 5 items represented on the menu, 2 of which come from the fruit vegetable component. The snack meal pattern for SFSP is a bit different from the breakfast and lunch supper meal pattern. Menu planners must offer 2 out of 4 possible components in at least the minimum specified serving size to children daily. Menu planners may choose from the vegetable fruit component, which is 3/4 cup minimum, the bread grain component, which is 1 serving minimum, and the meat alternative component, which is 1 ounce minimum serving, or the milk component, 8 ounces. Please be aware that although you may select 2 of the 4 available components listed on this slide, you may not offer 2 components that are both in the form of beverages for the snack offering. For example, although a 6-ounce serving of apple juice and an 8-ounce serving of milk would meet the criteria of offering 2 components in the minimum required portion size, this would not be allowed because that would be 2 beverages served. In contrast, a 3/4 cup of apple slices with an 8-ounce serving of milk would be permitted. Please also be aware that with the current SFSP meal pattern, there is no whole grain rich requirements for the bread grain component as seen in the NSLP SBP meal patterns. This applies for the SFSP breakfast, lunch and supper, and snack meal patterns. So to recap, a snack must contain a minimum of 2 food items from 2 different component groups in the minimum specified portion. Also, juice cannot be served when milk is served as the only other meal component. A few general rules to remember when meeting the meal service requirements are: 1, children must be offered all required meal components as per the meal pattern, otherwise the meals will not be deemed reimbursable and cannot be claimed. When SFAs are utilizing offer versus serve at breakfast, 1 additional item must be included on the menu that meets the specifications previously discussed. 2, under the offer versus serve option, children may decline 1 food item at breakfast and up to 2 food items at lunch. Please be reminded that some children may opt to still take all offerings despite having the offer versus serve option present, which is completely acceptable. 3, all meal components must be eaten on site under adult supervision unless the sponsor has requested and received permission from the state agency to allow children to take items off-site. There may also be exceptions for non-congregate or off-site feeding among experienced sponsors in rural areas without congregate feeding in the area. Field trips are another exception where children may consume reimbursable meals off-site. Anytime a site plans to have a field trip during the time where a scheduled meal, SFSP meal would normally be served on site, the state agency needs to be notified. This is even true of instances where children will be fed some other meal that is not being claimed for reimbursement, as the state agency always needs to know when there is a deviation in a site's schedule. As soon as a field trip is scheduled and the sponsor receives notice, the sponsor should notify the state agency by submitting a JOT form, which can be accessed through the link provided. When informing the state agency of planned field trips, complete the JOT form in its entirety. If the sponsor wishes to claim the meals for reimbursement that are offered to the students during the field trip, the sponsor must ensure that all minimum meal pattern requirements will be met. All components must be offered in the minimum portions with careful attention given to safety and sanitation, since the meals will be served away from the usual facility. As a final note regarding field trips, please be reminded that if you normally operate an open or restricted open site, the site must remain open to children from the community on the days when field trips occur. Failure to do so causes the site to operate in a closed enrolled capacity for which the site has not been approved. Please contact the state agency if you have any questions regarding this. We will now get into the specifics regarding each component in the SFSP meal pattern. The first component I will discuss is the milk component. When milk is offered under the SFSP meal pattern, it must be pasteurized fluid milk that is vitamin A and D enriched, can be whole, skim, low fat 1%, reduced fat 2%, and can be offered in any flavor. This is much more flexible than the NSLP SBP meal pattern. Milk must be offered with each reimbursable breakfast, lunch, and/or supper that is offered by the sponsor. It is optional with the snack meal service as long as 2 full components are being offered. It cannot be counted toward meal pattern requirements when it is used in cooking. It does not have to be offered in multiple fat contents or types, as seen with the National School Lunch or Breakfast programs. And under this pattern, choice is not required. Milk should never be frozen as a means to extend the life of the milk. The items listed on this slide are not creditable milk components, such as half and half, cream or ice milk, puddings and custards, non-fat dry milk, cheese, yogurt, evaporated milk, powdered cocoa mixes, commercial milkshakes, cream soups, imitation milk, or sour cream. We will now take a look at the meat component, which also includes approved meat alternates. Please be reminded that although the meat alternate component is a requirement at lunch and at supper, it is not a requirement at breakfast nor at the snack meal service. For lunch and supper, the edible portion of the meat alternate must weigh at least 2 ounces without the bone factored into the weight. If luncheon meats or frankfurters are to be offered on the menu, they must be all beef or all meat with no byproducts or extenders. Additionally, commercially prepared yogurt, cheese spreads, and cheese foods can be credited towards the meat component as meat alternates when used in the correct quantities. The allowable meat and meat alternates include meat, fish, poultry, and eggs, cheeses such as American cheddar, cottage, mozzarella, Parmesan, ricotta, and Swiss, dry beans and peas, nuts and seeds, and commercially produced yogurt in any fat content in plain, flavored, unsweetened, or sweetened varieties. Alternate protein products, which consist of products mixed or made into food items like ground beef patties and tuna salad. The items listed on this slide are not creditable meat alternate components. Bacon or salt pork, liverwurst, imitation seafood, ham hocks, neck bones, beef jerky, imitation cheese, cheese products, cream cheese, frozen or homemade yogurt, tofu, and coconut. Please note that commercially prepared combination foods, such as pizza, burritos, and chicken nuggets, must have documentation from a manufacturer in order to be creditable in the SFSP program. This includes a child nutrition label or product formulation statement to substantiate compliance with required quantities specified. The fruit vegetable component is a requirement at breakfast, lunch, and supper. It is an optional component with the snack meal service, provided that 2 of the 4 components are offered in the minimum required portion. For lunch and supper, 2 or more different fruit and vegetable items must be served, with the combined serving size no less than 3/4 of a cup. For instance, a menu planner may have 1/4 cup of applesauce on the menu with a 1/2 cup of green beans. This combination would meet the daily fruit vegetable component offering for lunch and for supper. Similarly, if the menu planner had listed fourth cup of mashed potatoes and a half cup of green beans on the lunch or supper menu, this too would have met the lunch or supper fruit vegetable component requirement. Cooked dried beans or peas can be counted as either a meat alternate or as a vegetable for the SFSP, but not as both in any one given meal. For instance, if offering red beans and rice as the entree on the lunch or supper menu, the menu planner would need to know in advance how he or she intends to credit the red beans, whether it be a meat alternate or as a vegetable, in order to ensure that a reimbursable meal has been planned. He or she would also need to adequately convey this information to the sites that will be offering the meal. Please note that the minimum countable portion of a fruit or vegetable item is 1/8 of a cup. Additionally, all juice offerings must be 100% full strength juice, with no more than 1/2 of the total fruit or vegetable requirements being met in the form of the juice. Sponsors may not serve two forms of the same fruit or vegetable in the same meal. For instance, an offering of an orange and a serving of orange juice would not be permitted. The same would be true of an apple served with applesauce. This would not meet the requirements of the vegetable fruit component offering under the lunch or supper SFSP meal pattern. Examples of allowable fruit and vegetable component offerings are as follows: whole fruits and vegetables, such as navel oranges, pears, or raw baby carrots, cooked vegetables, full strength or 100% fruit juice or vegetable juice, cooked or canned fruit, thawed or frozen fruit, and dried fruits. Please note that the fruit within yogurt, such as a parfait, whether blended, mixed, or placed on top, cannot be credited toward the fruit requirement. However, extra fruit provided as a separate component can be credited. The items listed on this slide are not creditable fruit or vegetable components. So fruit flavored gelatin, fruit sherbet, hominy, fruit drinks, fruit punch, sports drinks, fruit breads, powdered drinks, juice beverages, pickle relish, potato chips, ketchup, and fruit jams or jellies are not creditable in the SFSP. Each grain or bread offered as a part of a reimbursable SFSP meal must contain a minimum of 14.75 grams of enriched or whole wheat grain meal or flour, bran, and/or germ. For those that are familiar with the old school lunch and breakfast meal pattern, before the whole grain rich requirements went into effect, this will be familiar. This is the table that was used to allow each serving of grain bread to credit at a higher value. Please note that cooked, enriched, or whole grain rice, macaroni, or noodle products may be used to meet the grain bread requirement. One serving is equal to 1/2 a cup of cooked product. To determine how a common grain bread credit in the SFSP meal pattern, you will need to refer to the bread grains chart contained in the food buying guide. This can be accessed at the link provided near the bottom of this slide or by conducting a Google search for food buying guide. You access the grains and bread section of the food buying guide in order to view the grains and breads for the food-based menu planning alternatives in the CMPs or Appendix A table. Common bread grains are contained in this table by groups. Each group contains specific information regarding the crediting requirements of foods found in it. I will discuss the food buying guide further in another section of this training. Some common examples of allowable bread grains in whole grain or whole wheat and enriched grains include bagels, breads, ready-to-eat cereals, crackers, pitas, rolls, noodles or pasta, tortillas, brown enriched rice, buckwheat, oatmeal, and quinoa, cornbread, muffins, and enriched or fortified cereals. At breakfast, the serving size for cooked cereal must be at least half a cup in order to equal one serving of bread grain. The serving size of dry cereal must be at least 3/4 a cup or 1 ounce to equal a serving of bread grain. Items such as coffee cake, sweet rolls, or donuts made with whole grain or enriched flour can be used as a bread grain component. However, this can only be served as a breakfast and/or snack meal service option. Depending on the particular grain offering, different quantities may be needed from one item to the next in order to meet the one serving requirement. For instance, a larger portion of a muffin by weight would be needed in order to meet a full bread grain serving than would be the case with sliced bread. This is why it's particularly important to familiarize yourself with the food buying guide and the process of determining the crediting of bread grain items. The items listed on this slide are not creditable bread grain components: tapioca pudding, potatoes, potato chips, or hominy. SFSP sponsors are allowed to offer portions of food that are larger than the minimum required serving. If chosen wisely, additional foods can increase the variety of nutrients offered to children, such as by offering extra vegetables or fruit or whole grain bread grains instead of enriched white. Please note that if a program chooses to purchase additional food with SFSP funds, the food must be creditable under the meal pattern requirements. There is one exception to this rule, and that applies to condiments and spreads. These items, when offered with a creditable food, are exempt from the restriction previously stated and can be purchased with program funds. When in doubt, please contact the state agency for clarification. State agencies may authorize sponsors to follow the CACFP or Child and Adult Care Feeding Program meal pattern requirements for infants and children under 6 years of age when summer sponsors are serving a targeted group of children ages 6 and under. In order for an SFSP sponsor to do so, they must ensure that each group is receiving the appropriate minimum serving sizes indicated in the CACFP meal pattern, including the foods that are of a texture and consistency that is appropriate for the age, excuse me, and development of the children being served. They must contact the state agency to receive approval prior to initiating this flexibility, and failure to do so may result in non-reimbursement of the meals. During the SFSP, meals may be served to persons other than eligible children, such as program and non-program adults. However, there are two very important things to note regarding the serving of adults. No adult, including program adults, may be served until all participating children have been offered a reimbursable meal. And no adult meal may be claimed for reimbursement under the SFSP. Though adult meals cannot be claimed for reimbursement in any case, program adult meals can be served free of charge and considered allowable costs to the program. A program adult is a staff member that is directly involved at the site in the preparation or serving of the meals. Non-program adults, such as the monitor of the program, the bookkeeper or director, or parents of children being served, cannot receive a meal without some type of meal cost recovery. Often, sponsors choose to not serve non-program adults or do so at a set price that is high enough to cover the cost of the meal offered. If non-program adults are being served, funding other than CMP reimbursements must be applied to the SFSP account to cover the cost of the meals served, whether it's money collected from guests or from the sponsor in the form of donations. However, it is solely at the sponsor's discretion as to whether program and or non-program adults will be served. Any adult meal served at a site, whether program or non-program adult meals, must be documented in the appropriate area on your daily meal count sheet. It is vital to mark these meals in the designated area of the form, which is separate from the reimbursable meal count. Sponsors are responsible for communicating information to their sites regarding program and non-program adult meals. Should a sponsor choose to not offer any adult meals, site staff must be informed and well aware of their sponsor's policy regarding adult meals. If adult meals are served, site level staff will need to know: 1, the difference between program and non-program adult meals; 2, which types of adults pay for meals and how much to collect; and 3, as well as the process for collecting payment and the frequency in transferring monies collected to the sponsor. So to recap, 1, meals served to adults are never reimbursable. 2, the suggested price to charge non-program adults is normally your cost to produce the meal. When calculating your costs, be sure to include the cost of commodities as well. And 3, SFSP funds cannot be used to subsidize the cost of non-program adult meals. The cost of these meals must be recouped either through collection of money from the customer or from non-federal funds provided by the sponsor. Although it's not commonplace in the SFSP, sponsors may elect to sell a la carte items during meal service. Examples of this may include selling extra juice or milk to children who have received a reimbursable meal and wish to take another beverage. Should a sponsor opt to sell a la carte items, these purchases would be considered non-program components of the food service, and they would need to be tracked separately, accounting for the receipt, obligation, and expenditure of all SFSP funds. USDA strongly encourages SFSP sponsors to purchase locally, especially during the summer months, since summertime is a time of agricultural abundance, which makes local purchases more accessible. There are many benefits to purchasing locally, which include increased participation by improving the quality and appeal of meals. Schools can get started for the upcoming school year with efforts to source locally during the summer months, testing out recipes, using local foods, and creating menus that kids will love. And regional producers benefit from a reliable outlet for their products during the summer months. Kids and teens access fresh, nutritious meals and experiential learning activities at meal sites, staying nourished and active while school is out. More information on Farm to Summer can be accessed by visiting the 2 links provided on this slide. Now we will move into the Food Buying Guide, which is a resourceful tool when planning your meals. Offering nutritious, well-accepted meals to children while maintaining reasonable costs contributes to the success of your summer feeding program. When planning your meals, consider offering a variety of foods, incorporating commodities, shopping competitively, and using seasonal products, and the preparation time, food products, equipment, and staff, as well as incorporating locally produced foods. The food buying guide helps the sponsor to determine how hundreds of different food items credit towards the SFSP, but it also helps the sponsor to determine how much of a given ingredient or food it needs to purchase to provide a given meal. The food buying guide can be accessed online at the following websites: http:// www.fns.usda.gov/TN/food buying guide for child nutrition programs. Also, at this web address, there is a food buying guide online calculator that is very user friendly, and you can access at the food buying guide online calculator at the following link. For more detailed information on the food buying guide, let's go over this question. What is the food buying guide and why is it important to use for production and documentation of some summer feeding service meals? Food production records, although not required, are a best practice in the SFSP. This documentation is completed with the primary goal of illustrating on one page that a reimbursable meal was served to children. The food buying guide is the essential reference for food yield and crediting information for all child nutrition programs and meal patterns. The food buying guide assists child nutrition program operators, food manufacturers, and other stakeholders with purchasing the correct amounts of foods for meeting child nutrition meal programs, meal pattern requirements, determining the contribution that each food makes toward meal pattern requirements, and documentation of appropriate serving sizes on production records to illustrate a reimbursable meal was prepared and served. In question 2, what format is available for using the food buying guide? The food buying guide is available as an interactive web-based tool, a mobile app, and a downloadable PDF manual that can be printed. I highly recommend that you print the food buying guide to use as a resource and include penciled in notes and sticky flags for commonly used products. For detailed information and web-based training on the food buying guide, use the link provided to USDA's information portal. The food buying guide is broken into sections: meat alternates, vegetables, fruits, bread grains, and milk. Another common question regarding the use of food buying guides is how do I choose the right food product from the multiple items listed in the guide? The food buying guide for child nutrition programs includes over 2,100 foods. Follow the steps described in the next slides to confidently select the right food in the as purchased form and the correct serving size per meal contribution column description. Information displayed in that row should be used to make food purchases and production decisions. For the first step, find the correct food item by matching this description or specification of the food in the form that it was purchased. For example, was the item purchased fresh, frozen, canned, or dried? Then in step 2, you will find the menu preparation description in the serving size per meal contribution column that closely matches your food item. Choices listed on this slide represent general categories of most of the options available. For example, for fruit and vegetables, you will need to find the item based on whether it is purchased whole, diced, sliced, raw, cooked, canned, and note how the product will be prepared for service, as with juice or light syrup, drained, heated or unheated, pureed, or etc. For vegetables, check to see if it is a sauce, a puree, or a paste, which may greatly affect the yield and crediting of the vegetable. For meats, to determine if it is purchased raw, frozen, fully cooked, or roasted. Also determine if it is a canned item like canned tuna or chicken. For eggs, check the item as purchased to see if it is packaged as shell whole eggs, fresh or frozen liquid eggs, or hard cooked eggs. Determine if it is pre-cooked, diced, quartered, or whole, as those factors will also affect the measurement, serving size, and creditable yield. The cheese item should be selected not only by type, but also whether it is sliced, diced, or shredded. Step 3, to use the food buying guide to determine the amount to purchase. The additional information column may help determine the amount to purchase when the form served is different from the food as purchased, amount to purchase form. In this example, fresh carrots without tops will be prepared to make carrot sticks. These fresh carrots will need to be peeled and trimmed, so not all of the purchased amount is edible. Therefore, for every pound of carrots as purchased in this example, only 0.7 pounds will be creditable as edible vegetable. As an example of a best practice in documenting SFSP meals using production records, follow the documentation listed on this page. After using the food buying guide, the sponsor knows both the amount and type of carrots and celery to purchase and knows how to document the item description, the portion size in cups, and knows to document the total quantity prepared under column 5 in pounds. The sponsor is now confident that the 100 children forecasted to pick up a meal will be offered a half-cup creditable vegetable serving with 1/4 of a cup red orange vegetable and 1/4 of a cup other vegetable crediting for vegetable subgroups for the week. The Institute of Child Nutrition developed a printable poster called Basics at a Glance. This reference should be used as part of meal planning along with production record documentation to ensure correct utensils and smallwares are used based on standardized recipe yield and serving sizes desired for meal service. This resource should be used along with the USDA food buying guide to ensure meals are reimbursable and served correctly. The Basics at a Glance provides recipe abbreviations, volume equivalents for liquids, equivalent weights, ladles to select based on portions for service, pan capacity, and etc. For example, a common error in service and documentation of serving sizes is in determining the correct scoop size to use for a half-cup serving or other volume serving. If the production staff is using standardized recipes, but the service staff is often running out of food, the wrong scoop or ladle size could be the problem. To prevent this kind of error, ask SFSP production and service staff to use the scoop number guide on this poster to determine the correct scoop to use for the portion size listed on a recipe. The food buying guide can be used when manually calculating food quantities that are needed to provide a specified number of servings of particular portion size. The next 2 slides will provide examples. In this example, sponsor XYZ wants to offer a Frito pie on its lunch menu. The sponsor wishes for the Frito pie entree to provide a minimum of 1 grain bread per serving and wishes to produce 250 servings of this entree at its one site that it operates in the SFSP. What is the total quantity of Fritos needed to produce 250 servings of this entree? To determine this, the sponsor will access the online food buying guide and click on Breads Grains section. In this section, the sponsor will need to find the item listed that is most similar to the product to be used. In this case, Fritos. Please note that products are alphabetized to improve the ease at which they can be located. The sponsor finds a corn chips listing. There is a row specific to a half serving and a row specific to providing enough to offer a full serving of bread grains. The second row is the one that we will be interested in. This table tells us that there are 15 one-serving portions in a pound of corn chips, and that it takes about 2/3 cup of corn chips to credit as a single bread grain serving. Knowing that we wish to produce 250 single-serving portions, we then divide 250 total servings by the amount of servings per pound to determine that 16.67 pounds of corn chips would be needed. Please note that anytime rounding is required, it is always advised to round upwards to ensure that enough product is purchased to make the minimum number of portions required. There is also a streamlined process that can be used to calculate food quantities that are needed to provide a specified number of servings of particular portion size by using the online food buying guide calculator that is linked on this page. This slide gives you a screenshot of what the food buying guide calculator website homepage looks like. The corn chips example is reworked using the calculator on the next few slides. To utilize the food buying guide calculator, the first step is to select Tools, then Food Buying Guide Calculator -create shopping list for a new entry. Then you're going to name the shopping list, and we've named it Frito pie, and select the associated date. Next, you will select the program meal, and we will go with the SFSP lunch and summer, as well as the age grade group, and we'll pick all ages. The component group will be the next item you would select. We're going to select grains. Once the component group has been selected, the food buying guide provides a reference guide of the minimum requirements for that particular component. So as you can see, minimum grains requirement for SFSP, lunch and supper, bread, 1 slice, cornbread, biscuits, rolls, and muffins, 1 serving, cold, dry cereal, not applicable, hot, cooked cereal, 1/2 a cup, and cooked pasta noodles or grains, 1/2 a cup. Then enter the item keyword, which is in this example is corn chips, and select search. Once the search is complete, the calculator will provide the best options for the portion you wish to serve. In this instance, there is only one option, so you will click Add, and then click on Add Serving Size to provide exact details for the item. In our previous corn chip example, we wanted to provide 250 children with 1 serving of bread grain. So we would put 250 under number of servings and 1 serving under serving size. The information highlighted in light blue will update on the screen, and then we will take a look in the red box. This shows the answers we were looking for. The information that was calculated here is the same answer that we calculated manually in the previous example using the print version of the food buying guide. So 250 servings of corn chips, the amount to buy would be 16.67 pounds. And when we round up, it will be 16.75. If the menu planner already had some corn chips on hand, this could be listed in this section of the calculator. By doing so, the tool will automatically reduce the purchase amount needed by that amount. So in this example, we said that we had 4 pounds of corn chips on hand. So the sponsor should purchase 12.75 pounds of corn chips. If there are no corn chips on hand, this will be left at 0. You want to make sure you do save your work each time you add a new item. Once saved, you can access the Tools option and select Food Buying Guide Calculator My Shopping List to further edit the list or email/text or convert to PDF for printing. So why do sponsors need to use the Food Buying Guide? There are multiple reasons. Some of the most obvious reasons include the use of the Food Buying Guide ensures that sponsors purchase sufficient quantities of food items needed for a particular component yield. As a reminder, there are both component requirements, which are food groups that must be present at each meal, as well as portion requirements, the minimum serving size, and the SFSP meal pattern. Use of the Food Buying Guide helps to prevent the purchase of too much product, which will contribute to waste, as overproduction is never advised. Please be aware that during required administrative reviews, state agency and USDA staff will check to ensure that the appropriate amount of food was prepared for the number of servings that are needed. SFSP sites should always plan meals with the intent of serving one reimbursable meal to each eligible child. For those foods that are a combination food that are processed and not listed as described in the Food Buying Guide, the only way for a sponsor to receive credit for that product toward the meal pattern is to obtain a child nutrition label or manufacturer's product formulation statement. Child nutrition labels and product formulation statements are the way in which food manufacturers prove to sponsors that the foods they produce meet component requirements for foods that make up a reimbursable meal. These documents explain how products contribute to the meal pattern requirements for meals served under USDA's child nutrition programs. Commercially prepared foods are commonly seen on menus due to the fact that when they are used, labor and staffing needs are reduced, and children tend to be more likely to accept the products. Some common examples would include chicken nuggets at lunch and French toast sticks or pancake on a stick at breakfast. To use products such as these, sponsors must provide information on the nutritional contribution of the commercially prepared food. Moreover, sponsors will need documentation that shows the creditable portion of the following per commercially prepared food item: meat alternate, and/or grains, breads, and/or fruit and vegetable. The notation of and/or is included as many common commercially prepared foods tend to be combination foods, meaning that they provide contributions towards 2 or more component groups in a single dish. Consider chicken nuggets. Documentation on this product typically shows the creditable portion of grain bread and of meat alternate per a set number of nuggets offered. When a sponsor utilizes a commercially prepared product, They must be sure to purchase foods that have a child nutrition label or that a product formulation statement is obtained from the manufacturer. It is important to note that without a CN label or product formulation statement, commercially prepared food items cannot be utilized in child nutrition programs and cannot be credited towards meal pattern components. So what is a child nutrition label? A child nutrition label or CN label is a document that provides a warranty from the manufacturer that a food meets certain nutrition levels. It specifies a product's content and the contribution of the individual contents toward meeting the meal pattern requirements. It is found on a wide variety of foods sold by major food wholesalers and distributors. On this slide, you will see an example of how a CN label should look. The CN label will contain language that is very similar to how this example reads. For this particular example, 1 5-ounce pizza with ground beef and vegetable protein product provides 2 ounces equivalents of meat alternate, a half cup serving of vegetables, and 1.5 servings of grains breads for the child nutrition meal pattern requirement. Things that you will want to pay close attention to on a CN label are as follows. The 6-digit CN number provided in the upper right-hand side. True CN labels will always have a 6-digit code provided. The CN indication must be provided on all sides of the CN label. The crediting information provided in the text portion of the label. The product should always tell you exactly how many creditable servings of bread, grain, and/or meat alternate, and/or fruit vegetables are provided in each serving of the product. The product details should be provided at the very start of the text portion. Just like this example, 1 5-ounce pizza with ground beef and vegetable protein product. And then the area in parentheses at the end of the text portion that states use of this logo and statement authorized by the Food and Nutrition Service, USDA 01-16. This is the phrase contained at the end of an official CN label. Please note that the numeric information at the end provides the customer with information of when this label was issued. In this case, the label was issued in January 2016. So let's review. We have a State Fair original breakfast sticks label. Is this an acceptable CN label? Does it contain a 6-digit code in the upper right corner? And yes, we do see that there is a 6-digit code in the upper right-hand corner. The CN indication provided on all sides. We do notice that there are CN indications on all sides. The crediting information is provided in the text portion of the label. So in the text portion of the label, it does say each 2.51 ounce whole grain pancake batter wrapped pre-cooked ground pork, turkey, and vegetable protein product. And does it contain the USDA authorization phrase in parentheses at the end of the label? And we do see the use of this logo and statement authorized by the Food and Nutrition Service, USDA 06-14. So yes, this would be an acceptable CN label. When a sponsor purchases a commercially prepared food product without a CN label, a signed product formulation statement on manufacturer's letterhead may be requested to demonstrate how the product contributes to the meal pattern requirements. Ultimately, it is the program operator's or sponsor's responsibility to keep records to document that meals served fulfill the meal pattern requirements. Here is an example of what the prototype product formulation statement for meat alternate looks like. A manufacturer may use their own prototype, which can be allowed as long as all necessary product information is captured. However, please note that when in doubt, it is always best to request for the manufacturer to complete the product formulation statement request on the state's prototype form. USDA has developed a one-page tip sheet for accepting processed product documentation, which is particularly helpful to sponsors who use commercially prepared food products. The link to access this form can be found at the bottom of this slide. This is a screenshot of the USDA's tips for accepting processed product documentation for CN labeled products. As described in USDA's tip sheet, CN labels provide a warranty against audit claims when the product is used according to the manufacturer's direction. School program operators may submit an original CN label, a photocopy or a photograph of the valid CN label during an administrative review as acceptable documentation. When a valid CN logo and crediting statement is provided, state reviewers must not request a product formulation statement. This is a screenshot of USDA's tips for accepting processed product documentation for product formulation statements or other documentation. The product formulation statement must be on signed letterhead that demonstrates how the processed product contributes to the meal pattern requirements. Templates for documenting the meat alternates, grains, fruits, and vegetable components are available on the FNS website at the following link. Product formulation statements may be modified for various products contributing to more than one meal component. For example, a cheese pizza may credit towards the meat alternate, grains, and the red-orange vegetable subgroup. The crediting information for each meal component may be documented on the same product formulation statement. Creditable ingredients listed in the product formulation statement must match a description in the food buying guide for school meal programs, which is available at this link. Product formulation statements should verify that the product's contribution to the meal pattern requirements is not greater than the serving size of the product. For example, a 2.15 ounce beef patty may not credit more than 2.0 ounces of meat alternate. Product formulation statements should assure that the creditable components are in the finished product. Most sponsors utilize planned cycle menus in their SFSP programs. A cycle menu is a set of scheduled menus that are generally offered over the course of 2 to 4 weeks and then repeated in the same order. Benefits to using cycle menus include the following. Meal purchases can be planned well in advance. It can simplify food preparation. It allows for more accurate forecasting, and it can help to lower food costs. Standardized recipes are recipes that have been tried, tested, and shown consistently to provide the same yield. They should be used in all child nutrition programs to ensure that program requirements are met. There are numerous standardized recipes available online for child nutrition programs to use. For additional resources, please visit the USDA's website for the Summer Food Service Program Nutrition Guide. And this slide will provide you with additional helpful links for planning your menu. The last link will provide you with a direct link to the USDA standardized recipe database. Crediting information is provided at the end of each recipe, and recipes are alphabetized to assist the menu planner. New recipes will be highlighted at the very top prior to the alphabetized listing. Now we will allow a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the chat box below. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions, but if you do come up with any questions or have any comments, concerns, please feel free to contact nutrition support at Child Nutrition Programs at la.gov or call 225-342-9661. And I thank you for your time and attention during today's presentation. Have a great day.